House recognizes the member of government.
Go to the advocacy text and extend it. What the text says is competitive academic debate with text advocacy is preferable to debate that happens without that. That means that we can win in two ways. First of all, we can win by showing that debate that only has text is preferable to the debate that doesn't have text. Secondly, though, we can win if we can show that textual debate, including performance, is preferable to performative debate without any sort of text. This means that our arguments can include both performance and text. They never make any arguments against our advocacy or never make any frameworking arguments here, which means that we have a lot of leg up in terms of how we're going to be answering the off case. Go to the advantage of that we have, the only one basically. Extend the A point. We tell you text is necessary to delineate the teams from each other and the burdens between each other. We think that this is really important because a lot of what Zach is telling you on the disadvantages, like don't interact with this. We tell you that you don't know what your burdens are in the debate round to begin with if you don't have text to delineate those burdens. This means that it comes before everything that he's talking about on the off case. And when he talks about like the different methods and that kind of stuff, we have no way of evaluating those methods unless we have some sort of delineation before talking about those methods or after performing debate, etc. We would argue that you need to break the frame in performative debate and to be able to access any of the impacts or the things that they talk about. Sure.
All right, when I asked Peter the question, is it okay to mix the two, he said you're getting nitpicky, and now you're extending his offense. How does that work?
I don't understand your question.
Sometimes he says stuff and doesn't understand the question. All right, then you can extend to number 3, where we tell you that humans have a natural disposition to language. It's specifically a part of our brain. This means that language is always going to make the debate better. Like, even if performative debate can be good at some level, we think performative debate with textual advocacy is always going to be preferable because it includes like the communication, the ways that we relate to other individuals. Then you can extend like all the stuff about the delineation, etc. Like we talk specifically about silence debate. Like we give you examples of performative debate that don't make any sense unless you have textual advocacy. I think this takes out all of the offense they're giving you on their off case. We say performative debate is okay, but explain what the hell you're performing. Otherwise, we have no idea what's going on. We say if you can't like just unwrap and then just sit down. We like, what does that mean? You need to wrap and then explain how you're deconstructing certain normative rules within debate. We would argue this is the best way for the judges to evaluate the round, but it also allows for the best access. Then on the impact level, I think we're just winning here because there's no answers. I think you can extend the first argument. The only way for equal access is the text. Like that just cold takes out all of their offense. If you don't have equal access, people aren't going to join the activity. We tell you this is the biggest impact in the round because in terms of magnitude, if people don't join the activity dies out. We see debate programs dying all over the United States because people don't understand what the hell performance is, but we would argue that you need to have this sort of explanation so people don't escape from the activity and leave just because they don't understand what's going on. Additionally, you can extend Peter's number 2, where he tells you that that interrogating ideas is important, and you can't interrogate, like maybe you can interrogate with pictures, but I don't understand how that works. We would say that interrogation happens when you talk about it, when you inquire, when you use words with the reflexivity. He gives you the analysis here. We tell you that you have to interrogate ideologies and hold people accountable. Like we don't know what performance means, we have to be able to talk about it. Remember all of the examples Zach gives you on the off case about like talking about it on the internet after the round. That's textual. That's what we're talking about. We say you need to talk about those sorts of things. So I think all of these are just reasons to vote for us. Let's go to the off case. On inclusion. The A point is about accessibility. He talks about how we don't want to exclude different arguments. Like the overview here is we're not saying don't listen to performance and never vote on performance. We're saying know what the performance is and have performance with textual advocacy. Remember, we never say don't run performance. Like Peter and I run performance. We ran silence in the other debate, like Peter even references. Our argument here is to just have some sort of way of explaining what you're doing. Then when he talks about different methods and about talking about it, sorry, I don't know where I am. Oh, here we are. Then when he talks about how you base people on labeling, etc., on the exclusion argument, he says this is the only way to solve for these sorts of things and the normative presumption that occurs. Our argument here, first of all, is that we're not talking about the labels of the positions, whether you call them performance or not. We're talking about the substance of the positions. If you perform and then you explain what that is, then we're saying that's good performative debate that includes the text. My second argument under here is that there are alternatives. If you want to have just performance without any sort of explanation, have specific speech events where you're supposed to perform and everyone knows the framework for that. Like a poetry event, you know that the framework for that is going to be people are going to have poetry, and so you have the framework necessarily there within the round. But with debate, you don't have that specific framework for specific types of performance unless you break the frame, and that's what we're talking about and what is necessary. My third argument under here is, I would say, turn, that it marginalizes students. That's the offense we're giving you on case. If people don't understand the performance, they leave the activity, which means that debate is declining, and we never want to have that sort of thing where we're driving people out of the activity. But I think the fourth response under here is the perm. It's what I tell you at the beginning of the case. We can perform and then explain the performance, and that's the best way to evaluate the round. On the impact level, he talks about homogenizing debate. Again, like, we're not homogenizing debate. We're saying make sure that it's good debate. I think we can all agree that bad debate rounds just make everyone leave the building and not go to debate rounds ever again. But I think on the second impact, they talk about calling for intervention. Our argument here isn't intervene, it's don't intervene, and the only way not to intervene is to have an explanation of the performance. Like, our argument is not that we should intervene against people who choose to have performance, it's that we should understand what the performance is so that we don't misinterpret it. And then on the engagement, they talk about not relying on the judge. Again, you only rely on the judge when you only perform because the judge doesn't understand what the performance is, or might not agree with how your performance is meant to be interpreted, etc. Like, we just agree with a lot of what they're saying. We just think it's a reason to vote for us. And they talk about how they don't explain why it's unfair, etc. Like, we give the alternative, break the frame, and explain your performance. Go to the Millsian democracy. He talks a lot about engagement with the other. My first argument under here is that the best way to engage with the other is through dialogue. That's what we tell you on case in terms of philosophy and interrogating ideas. We tell you this is the best way to do it is through words and through linguistic analysis. My second argument under here is that communication is community, that we need to be able to communicate, and the best way we do that is through language. Remember, Peter tells you that all humans have a certain part of our brain that is able to give us access to linguistic analysis and to communication with each other. We target this is the best way to have that sort of communication and therefore lead to the best sort of community. Then he talks about different strokes for different folks, and he talks about all these sort of things. Like, the stuff he's talking about are textual, like going on the internet, like talking about it with people, that's all textual. I'm just not understanding how that's a reason specifically to vote for them. We're not saying don't have performance, we're just saying have performance with the text. Then he talks about how different people learn different ways. My first argument under here is that the easiest way for everyone to understand is through words. Our argument here is that at the point where we all enter an activity knowing that people are going to be speaking words and talking about different things, that's the best way to evaluate the round, the best way to make sure that we're not misinterpreting each other. I think that there's a really important thing here to talk about, like when we talk about misunderstanding, like with performance, I think this is kind of a turn. We would argue that, look at the example of what Texas Tech did at the Colorado College about a year ago. Like, they tried to have some sort of performance outside the debate, but it was misinterpreted, and their debate program and the debate tournament almost got shut down because they didn't talk about the performance afterward. The talk came after the performance, but by then they had already had the huge problem with almost getting the tournament shut down. That's what happens when you don't break the frame, when you just have performance, and I think that's a reason to reject them. Finally, on inclusion. On the stuff about the internet, that's the tech, that's what we're talking about. They talk about how teams won't have funding, etc. Our argument under here is that this is non-unique. Like, some teams just have more money than others, but we would argue turn here that teams will not get funding if people don't understand the performance debate. If the administrators aren't understanding why you're speaking hip-hop and sitting down, they're not going to fund your team. Additionally, on not being able to afford it, we would argue a turn on this. We would say, or actually a non-unique on this, we would say that it's cheap to, like, look on the internet. Like, everyone has internet access, so you can just look up arguments and write your own arguments. I'm not sure how this is a unique reason to vote for them. I think you're voting for Viola.
Says about ideology.